Welcome to Burning Eyes Tech, everyone. In today's episode of the Azure AZ-900 series, we're going to be taking a look at Azure's Compute Services. That's going to be our main topic for today, but it's not going to be our only topic. The other topics are subtopics, so to speak, if you can see here on the list. So Azure Compute Services, you can see, is the first one. That's the main one. And the other ones, virtual machines, containers, resource groups. Yes, these are topics, but they're all subcategories of compute services. Virtual machines, containers, and resource groups are all components you would find in a compute services category. Now, they are not the only components you would find in a compute services category. There are actually many other services you would find there in that category. Virtual machines and containers are just the only ones we're going to be covering in this particular video today, because they're actually quite a mouthful. It's going to take us some time to cover these. But just to give you a taste as to what we actually have available in that category, let's quickly circle around to the portal and just give you guys an indication. And here we are on the Microsoft Azure portal. So I've taken the liberty of creating myself a trial. So in case someone's wondering about my details displaying at the top, don't bother spamming me. That's just a fake email account I went and created temporarily for the purposes of this trial and for this particular course, or this particular video, at least in this case. So if you are going to go and find yourself the compute services category, you're going to have to go here to the top left hand side and click on those three little stripes. That's basically the portal menu. As you can see, it says show portal menu. Now, most of us, including myself, we just normally refer to it as the navigation pane. If I click on that, it opens the navigation pane. Now, up until about a year, maybe 2 years ago, this actually used to be locked in place. And then about a year or two ago, Microsoft decided to have this disappear by default unless you actually go and click on it. And initially it annoyed me a bit, and then I actually decided, you know what, this is actually better because it gives me more room to work with, especially if you're working on a very small laptop screen or something. Then this is actually convenient in most cases. Now, in this navigation pane, which actually also used to be called the hub about 4 or 5 years ago, you're going to find a whole list of components. These are not the only things you can go and do on the Azure portal. This is just some of the most common things you can go and do on the Azure portal. You can actually go and drag them around. You can see I can actually drag my components around like so. You get to choose which ones you want here, but generally that is the default that you will see. Now, if you would like to go and look for something else and you don't see it in this particular list, you can go use the big search bar here at the top. I like to call it the life jacket. Nobody calls it that as far as I know. That's just me. And the reason I refer to this as the life jacket is because the cloud is changing very rapidly, especially the Azure portal. So very often you would find components moving around, they would be renamed, they would be deleted, or new stuff would be added. And one day when that happens, not if, but when that happens, because it is going to happen to you, at least then you can just go to the search bar, run a search for that component, and you can find it without even knowing where it is. So just to give you an idea as to a few random small things that have changed, this one here, it says all services, which we're actually going to go and click on in a moment, as well as that one. All services actually used to be called more services. It used to be way at the bottom of this navigation pane, and it used to be called more services. So if you're going to be following some sort of instructions or guides that you found online, they might tell you to go click on all services, or they might even tell you to go click on more services. Now here you are looking for the button that's called more services. You're looking high, you're looking low, you're looking everywhere, but you can't find it. Meanwhile, the name has just changed, or meanwhile they maybe moved it to the top, which is what happened. This one, it says create a resource. This used to be called new. It still had a little plus sign there, but it was called new. N-E-W. Now it just says create a resource. So it's small changes, but something small like that could be just enough to throw you off your game, especially if you've never actually worked on the Azure portal. If you've got some experience on the Azure portal, small changes like that shouldn't influence you because you can kind of figure out the difference in a matter of a few seconds. But if you've never played on the portal before and you're brand new, and you're trying to figure out where what is and how what works, and someone goes and changes small names like that, that can really mess up your day, and it could potentially cause you to take hours to find something where it should have taken you just a minute. Anyway, getting back to the main topic at hand, if you're looking for more services, you can kind of see there it actually says all services. And even though it says all services, if I click on that, it's not actually all the services. It just shows you majority of your services. Here on the left hand side, there's another menu of sorts. And you might think these are services, but these are actually just categories of services for the most part. Now, the category we're looking for right now, today in today's video, is this one here called compute. And if I click on that little, there we go. It's shows you a list of some of the services you would find in this category. Some being the keyword. It still doesn't show you all the services you would find in this category. So if you don't find what you're looking for, most likely because it's something out of the ordinary, you might need to go and run this little search block here, or use that little search block to find whatever it is you're looking for. I have to do that all the time, especially with me being a trainer. In case you guys don't know, I'm actually a Microsoft certified trainer. I'm certified in all of these courses that I'm training and many more. Now, with me being a trainer, I find myself often having to go look for components that's not even listed here. It's a real schlep, but what can you do? So the ones we're going to be covering today is going to be virtual machines and containers. So we'll see how much time actually allows. So for now, at least you know where you can go and find your compute services. Another way to get to services or compute services is to go to your navigation pane, to go click on create a resource. And it's essentially going to show you actually the same stuff, just in a different view. Here you're also going to see a list of the different categories. In other words, compute being one of them. And if I click on that, it's the same thing basically. It just shows it to you differently. Now it doesn't show as many as we saw previously, but it still shows you more or less the same stuff. So if you don't find what you're looking for, once again, click on the little search block, run a search for it, and you should be helped via that way. All right, let's go back to the slide. So, and our next topic is going to be a subcategory of compute services, which is virtual machines, more commonly known as VMs by most of us in the IT sector. Now, what the heck is a virtual machine or a VM? Now, you actually get many kinds in the sense of platforms, so we're obviously going to be talking about Microsoft virtual machines today, more specifically the kind you get on the Azure platform. But just of Microsoft alone, you get virtual machines on premises as well, and most commonly, these are run on a platform called Hyper-V. That's Microsoft's virtualization platform for on-premises environments. You can run it on a client operating system like Windows 10. You can go and install it as a role on the server side, but that's generally what we run on premises when it comes to the Microsoft side of things. There are many other third parties out there, which I'm not going to mention right now, but there are many outside that you can go and actually use to go and create yourself virtual machines on premises. So what is a virtual machine? It's exactly like a real computer, except it just doesn't have its own actual physical hardware. Hence the name, virtual machine. It doesn't have its own RAM, it doesn't have its own CPU, doesn't have its own hard drive, etc., etc. So this is going to be hosted on top of your machine, digitally speaking, obviously. So if you're going to be hosting a virtual machine on top of your operating system, it goes without saying that this needs to be a pretty beefed up machine. In other words, a thick client in most cases, not a thin client, a thick client. Thick client means it's pretty beefed up. A lot of RAM, pretty decent CPU, a lot of hard drive space, etc. So now what's going to happen here is you're going to go and add Hyper-V on premises. If this is going to be on premises, you would normally go and add Hyper-V, install it, extract it, or add it to role. Once you've done that, you're going to go and create yourself a virtual machine. You're going to go and allocate RAM to this virtual machine, hard drive space, and all kinds of stuff like that. But before you can go and do that, you need to decide on what operating system you're going to be running on there and what you're going to be running on top of that operating system. Now, why that is because you need to assign resources to this virtual machine. You're going to have to go and calculate how much you need to give to this machine. So if you know you're going to install Windows 10, you're going to have to install probably at least a 1 gig or a 2 gig when it comes to RAM. If you're going to go and install Windows 10, you're probably going to have to allocate at least 32 gigs of hard drive space, minimum, probably more than that. So all of these are questions you're going to have to go and ask yourself when it comes to installing this virtual machine. How much do I need to give this virtual machine? And once you decide on how much you're going to give to this virtual machine, you need to go and check, do you actually have that much to give to this specific virtual machine? There's a very good chance that on your host machine, you don't actually have so much resources. Maybe you don't have enough RAM to give because your host still needs RAM for itself to be able to function. Otherwise, it's going to crash. You still need hard drive space left for the host. You still need some CPU left for the host. If you're going to give too much to the virtual machine, it's just not going to work. Something else you might want to keep in mind here is, are there currently any other virtual machines running on your machine locally? If there are, you're probably giving resources to them already at the moment as well. And if you are they currently running or not? Depending on if they're running or not, that might also have an influence, because if they're not running, they're not using these resources. Now, everything we've said about virtual machines up until now is on-premises virtual machines, which means it occupies space on your machine, uses your resources, etc. Now, if you're going to go move your virtual machine to the cloud, which we are going to talk about now in a moment, That is a massive benefit because it's going to cost you a lot less in most cases. You don't have to go and buy yourself physical servers to go and host these virtual machines on. You don't have to go and maintain them as much. The hardware, all of that stuff falls away. It's someone else's problem now. In this case, obviously, it's Microsoft's problem. So now you simply just get to go and upload the hard drives of these virtual machines if that's what you want to do. It has to be a VHD file though. It does not accept VHDX files. For those of you that know what VHDs are, that's the hard drive. This has to be a fixed hard drive, not a dynamically expanding hard drive. So fixed is also called static. It has to be within a certain size. So this size keeps changing. At some point it was 1 terabyte, then it was 2, then it was 3, then it was 6. I'm not 100% sure what this exact number is. I'm going to have to go and double check it. But the last time I checked, it has to be within 6 terabytes or less. So if you have a hard drive at 6 terabytes or less, you should be able to upload it, provided that it's a VHD, provided that it's a fixed hard drive, not dynamically expanding. You can convert it from dynamically expanding to fixed by using a PowerShell script. You can convert it from a VHDX file to a VHD file also using a PowerShell script. You're going to go and upload these hard drives and presto. Now, should you ever need to go and download this, which is possible, it's actually going to occupy the same amount of space. So if this hard drive is 1 terabyte in the cloud, keep in mind it's a fixed hard drive. So if it's 1 terabyte in the cloud, it will occupy 1 terabyte on your local disk, wherever you're going to go and store this. So just keep that in the back of your mind if you're ever going to go and do that. Now, what we're going to be doing today is we're actually going to go and create a virtual machine in the cloud, and we're going to be doing it from scratch. How far we go depends on how much time actually allows, but I think let's go to the portal and show you guys how and where we can actually go and create ourselves a virtual machine on the Azure portal. Here we are again on the Azure portal. So I'm going to go ahead and click on navigation again. This time I'm going to go click on virtual machines. Now that's not the only place you can find it. Like we established earlier, there's probably 10 or 20 different ways you can actually get to any component. I'm fortunate enough to be able to find this in my navigation panel right now. If it's not there, you can find it on the compute section in the all services category, or you can go here to create a resource. You can find it under compute there, or you can even go and type in virtual machines here at the top. So if I were to go and type in virtual machines and check that out, there it is. I can go click on it there too if I want to. So it's very easy to find whatever it is you're looking for. So if you don't find it, simply just type it in the search bar and you should be helped. So let's just go click here. Virtual machines. Now at the moment, as you can see, I currently do have a bunch of virtual machines. If this is a brand spanking new Azure subscription you've got, or if it's a trial, like in my case, this is just a trial subscription, you'll probably see nothing here. This is going to be a blank page. I've got 3 random virtual machines here, which I'm just fooling around with for some other exercise purposes. And if you'd like to go and add yourself a virtual machine, create a new one, in other words, you're going to go click here where it says add. In the past, about up until a year or two ago, there actually used to be another add button here in the middle as well, which has actually since disappeared now in the meantime. Don't know why Microsoft does what they do sometimes, but hey, I'm going to go click on add. What do I want? A virtual machine. And here we go, boys and girls. Now here at the top, you're going to see a list of tabs. Here you can go and configure different aspects of this specific virtual machine. So here I can go and configure things regarding the hard drives, add hard drives, mount existing hard drives, delete hard drives, all kinds of things regarding this particular virtual machine can be changed to regarding hard drives, networking, management. Now just off the bat, to create yourself a virtual machine, you don't actually need to go to any of these tabs in most cases. You can actually manage that by just staying on this tab alone. But if you do need to, you can go to any of these tabs. And it's worth noting, you can do this even after the virtual machine has already been created. Even after it's been created, you can still go to these tabs and still go and tweak that stuff and change it. It can be done either while the component's being created, in this case it's a virtual machine, or after the component has been created. Alright, so here at the bottom you just choose your subscription. Now, if you have a legit subscription for your company, you're just going to go choose one of those. You're probably just going to have 1 or 2. At the moment I just have a trial, so it's a sponsorship. Here you get to choose your resource group. Now, at the moment I have, well, I'm supposed to have none because it's a trial, but I had to go and create one for my virtual machines. Now by default you'll have none. If I click there now, I have a bunch here that I used for my virtual machines. So if this is a brand spanking new subscription, you will have none. Now, what is a resource group? I'm unfortunately obligated to somewhat explain this now to you guys. I know this is a topic in the actual slideshow, but for us to proceed here, I need to somewhat explain what a resource group is. It's a grouping of components, not just virtual machines. The way you group your things is actually up to you. I suppose you can go use your imagination. The rule of thumb here is to try and group things that's more or less created in the same time period, and that's more or less going to be deleted in the same time period if they are ever going to be deleted for that reason. It stores the metadata. So this also helps you to go and comply with regulatory compliant, requirements or local laws in your country. So if your data is not allowed to be stored in certain countries, or if it's not allowed to be stored outside of your country, this is a good way to go and comply with those regulations and those laws. So you are able to go and create a resource group, and you simply just make sure that that resource group is stored somewhere where it's allowed. So if it has to be stored in your country, just make sure that resource group is stored in your country, provided that there's a data center in your particular country. If it's not allowed to be in certain countries, well, just don't choose a data center in that country then. It's as simple as that. You can go and group this for any amount of reasons. This could be a resource group because I want to go and sort it by branch. So if you've got a company that's got multiple branches, you can particularly maybe go and create a resource group for each branch. It doesn't matter if you're creating a virtual machine, a database, this could literally be anything. Whenever you create something for a certain branch, you just choose that resource group for that specific branch. So it allows you to organize stuff by branch. Or you can go and create resource groups by components. So maybe you've got one only for virtual machines. Every time you create a virtual machine, you just choose the virtual machine resource group. So everything regarding virtual machines, doesn't matter which country it is or what branch it is, all virtual machine data will be stored in this one specific resource group called virtual machine groups. So in the end of the day, you really and truly are just limited by your imagination when it comes to these resource groups. So I'm going to go ahead and click on create new. What do you want to call this? You can call this whatever you want. So I'm going to call this VM for virtual machine and RG for resource group. Now I already have one called that because I made a virtual machine resource group. You can see I tend to think like that. I'm just going to add a one there. So what I like about Azure Portal, this doesn't just apply to the virtual machine section here or the specific naming component. Whenever you type a value into a block, it has this little green tick here, which actually shows you if the value is accepted or not. Now with a name, this is just a name, you're pretty much guaranteed to get a green tick because it's just a name. The only time it's not going to give you a green tick is if that name has been taken, which was the case now actually of me. But if you're going to go and type in some sort of other value somewhere else where it has to be something specific, there's a good chance it might give you an error. Now if it does, there's normally like a little exclamation mark which shows you what you're doing wrong. So you just kind of hover your mouse cursor over the exclamation mark and it will tell you what you're doing wrong. I mean, how cool is that? Let me just type this in here again. So right there where that little green tick is, there's going to be an exclamation mark or a cross. It's normally an exclamation mark. You hover your mouse cursor over it, and it's actually going to tell you why this is not accepted and what you need to type in to get it to be accepted. Now, how useful is that? That's actually very useful, especially if you have no experience of Azure, or maybe just not of that specific component. Maybe that specific component is just something you've never worked with before. So you might not know what to go and type in that particular block. Now you will. Just hover your mouse cursor, then it's actually going to tell you what to go and type in that block. So yeah, now how cool is that for a helping hand? I'm just going to go click on OK for now. That should suffice. Here you get to choose a name for this virtual machine. You can call it whatever you want. Generally speaking, but if you are working for an organization, especially if it's a relatively large organization, you might not be able to call it exactly what you want because some companies have got a naming convention that you need to go and follow. You might need to label it according to your country, according to the branch, according to what type of server this is. I don't know. So for now, I'm just going to call this Windows 10. I'm going to install a Windows 10 machine just for argument's sake. Here, region, you get to choose which data center you want to use. Now, it's worth noting this does not always say region. Depending on what component we're creating, it might say location in some cases even. Location, region, potato, it's all the same. It's the same thing. So for some reason, they don't always call it region. They sometimes call it location, but it's the same thing, people. So region or location or data center, whatever they decide to call it on that particular day, that is where you're going to be storing this component. In this case, we're creating a virtual machine. Which data center in the world do you want to go and choose? Now, the majority of the data centers are going to be in the United States and somewhere in Europe. But there are obviously assorted data centers all over the world. Here and there you'll find some few random loose ones. Ideally, you want to choose one that's got a decent price. That's not too far from your specific country because of latency. The further away something is, digitally speaking, the higher the latency. So the more lag you can experience, for those of you guys that don't know what latency is. So you're going to have to go through more routers. It's going to travel a lot further, digitally speaking, which means your latency goes up, which means there's lag. Your components are going to be slower. So you want to get something as close as possible to home, but yet keeping it at a decent price. Something else you need to keep in mind here is functionality. Not all of these data centers have the same functionality. So you have to go and compare and just check if that data center you want to use, if it has all the functionality that you need. You might need to go and use a different one purely because of the functionality that's available here. It's a schlep, but what can we do, eh? So I'm going to just choose East US. I think that's the only one that's available on this trial subscription. If you have a legit subscription, you can actually go and choose something else. I'm restricted to East US in this trial subscription, so that's fine. It should serve my purpose. You've got availability options should you want to go and choose that. Here under image, you get to choose what operating system you want to install on this virtual machine. It's not just limited to Windows, by the way. Just because we are on a Microsoft cloud platform doesn't mean you have to install a Microsoft operating system like Windows 10 or Server. You can install third-party stuff. You can go and install Linux, Apple, Android, you name it. You can install pretty much whatever you want. So I'm going to go here and click on the drop-down list. And here's some of them. That's the keyword, some. It's not all of them. You'll see there's Ubuntu. That's not Microsoft. You've got SUSE. You've got Red Hat. The list goes on. And here's a few of the most common Microsoft stuff. So I think they basically went and listed the most common things people would like to go and choose. It's not all the stuff. So you can actually go further back. If I want to go and choose something older than that, I can go further back. So I can go click here and see all images if I need to. For now, I'm just going to click on Windows 10 because that should suffice for our needs. There we go. Size. Now in the cloud, and we did mention this in episode 1 and 2, I think it was episode 2, you only pay for what you use. If you don't use something, you don't pay for it. It's an on-demand service. So if I need more resources, if I want to give this virtual machine more RAM afterwards, I can do that in a matter of seconds in some cases. Seconds to minutes. I can increase it very quickly. I can decrease it very quickly because if I'm not using something, I don't pay for it. So here you get to choose the specs. Now, yes, this is unfortunately cloud, which means you're always going to relinquish some level of control. I think infrastructure as a service is the one where you relinquish the least amount of control, in my opinion, and that's what we're doing right now. A virtual machine on the Azure platform is seen as infrastructure. It's infrastructure as a service being rendered back to me for a monthly fee or a yearly fee. So I'm going to go click on this little drop-down list. I think it's probably going to be better if I just go and choose see all sizes. There you go. It's going to give you a brief indication as to what you've got available here. CPUs, it's not as detailed as you would have on premises. On premises, you can obviously choose more in detail what you want, but it's good enough, I think. You can go and choose how much RAM you want this virtual machine of yours to have, how many hard drive, how fast the hard drive should be, all of that kinds of stuff. Way here on the right, it's going to give you an indication as to how much this is going to cost you in your particular currency in your country. This is per month. It's worth noting that's not necessarily how much it's going to probably cost you in general. You know what? That's an estimate, assuming this virtual machine is going to be running the whole month. If it's going to be turned off at certain periods, let's say during the night, or for a whole week, or for a few days, it might not actually cost you that much. It might actually cost you a lot less to host it in the cloud. Now, if these values look very, very little to you or very, very much to you, please note it does vary from currency to currency. It might look a lot to you because of my currency, or it might look like very little to you because of my currency. So please go and check this in your specific currency. Don't use my numbers here on the right hand side. Please don't do that because each currency is different. It also depends on the data center, obviously. A data center is also going to have an influence here. So I'm just going to leave it on the default for now. I'm just going to click on select. Username. Username is the main username on this computer or this server. In this case, it's just a client operating system. So if you were to have a normal client operating system installed on a normal PC at your house or the office, that first account, that main account, which is normally the only account on your PC, what do we call that? That's the admin account. Now you get to give that account a name. And that's the same thing we're going to do here in the cloud now. So I'm going to call this Burning Ice Tech, the same as my channel name. Here we go. It says that's accepted, but we kind of expected as much because it's just a name. So you're pretty much guaranteed to get a green tick. Under password, it has to meet the minimum password complexity requirements. Now, up until about 2018, maybe 2019, I think it was up until 2018, this could be an 8-character password. It had to be uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols. But from towards 2018, it has to now be a minimum of 12 characters. Minimum of 12 characters. So I'm going to put in my 12-character password in here. Just give me a moment. giving me a green tick because it's 12 characters. It's uppercase, it's lowercase, it's got numbers, and it's got symbols. If you did not meet all those requirements, you will not get a green tick for your password. All right, now if we scroll down even further here, you get to choose which ports are open for your specific virtual machine. Now you can go and choose to have none of them open. I don't recommend doing that because you are going to have to connect to this virtual machine and control it somehow. So at the very, very least, you're going to have 3389 open. So 3389, that's for remote desktop. That is generally how we connect to these virtual machines in the cloud. It's going to allow you to go and download an RDP file. You're going to use that to connect to your virtual machine in the cloud, which we'll show you in a bit. So if I click on this drop-down list, you get to choose which port you want open. Now, in case some of you guys are thinking to yourselves, wow, that's not a lot of choices. These are the only ones they show it to you by default, but you can go and configure them afterwards. So as soon as this virtual machine is done deploying, as soon as it's created, it only takes about 2 minutes to 5 minutes to create this virtual machine, mind you. As soon as it's created, you can go to the firewall of this virtual machine and you can go and allow more ports or block more ports specifically if needed. So this is just the most common ports the average Joe would need in the beginning, right off the bat after starting the virtual machine. So taking that into mind, that's what they've added here. Now, way in the past, all ports would normally be blocked by default. I think once again, up until about 3 years ago or so, all ports would normally be blocked by default. I normally had to go and tell my students, please remember to go and enable port 3389 because this is normally turned off by default and then my students cannot connect to the virtual machine. So they always had to go afterwards to the firewall and add 3389 in the firewall afterwards, which was such an inconvenience. Now I've seen Microsoft by default turns on that port. So someone at Microsoft decided, you know what, we're going to make people's lives easier. So that guy deserves a beer. Honestly speaking, I think that guy deserves a beer because that made my life so much easier when I need to go train Azure courses, especially fundamentals courses like this one. So for now, I'm just going to say, let's turn them all on. That's not something you want to go and do on a real virtual machine, especially if this is a server. If you want to do that on a server, you're exposing yourself. For right now, it says licensing. You have to click on this little tick box, otherwise it's not going to allow you to go through. I confirm I have an eligible Windows 10 license with multi-tenant hosting rights. I actually don't have one, but because this is a trial, it's going to allow me to go through. Because at the end of the day, they want us to be able to test this and try this. Because if I can't test this or try this, how am I going to know if I like it or not? If I don't know if I like it or not, I'm not going to go and buy it. So it all comes back to money at the end of the day. They want us to buy their services and their products. Now, how am I going to know if I want to buy it if I can't test it? Which is why they will allow us to go and test it without a license right now. But if you are going to get yourself a legit subscription, in other words, you can see here at the top, I only have a trial right now. But if you're going to go get yourself a legit subscription, you're going to have to go get yourself a legit license. No pirating, that's illegal. Don't do that. So for now, I'm going to go click on review and create. It should give you an indication more or less what this is going to cost you per hour. It actually has a per minute billing system, not per hour. It just shows it to you in hour, but it actually is a per minute billing system that it has, believe it or not. So this is just a summary of your virtual machine. I'm going to scroll further down here. I'm going to go and just double check it all. It seems all good. And I'm going to go click on create. Now, some components that you create on the Azure portal is going to take you maybe a second, 2 seconds in some cases, where other ones like this one might take you 2 minutes to 5 minutes to go and create. Why? Well, just like on premises where it has to actually go and install the operating system and all of that, the same applies here in the cloud. It's actually going to go ahead now and install Windows 10 for us onto that virtual machine. So that's going to take a while. It actually still is a way faster than what you would do on premises. In the past, this would take up to 20 minutes sometimes in the cloud. Then it went faster to a point where it was 15 minutes and then it was 10 minutes. Nowadays, more recently, I've seen this thing is actually done about 2 to 5 minutes. So I don't know what these guys have been doing at Microsoft, but clearly they're doing something right because these virtual machines can be deployed up and running in 2 to 5 minutes. Now, on premises, if you would like to go and multitask and do multiple things at the same time, let's say I want to go ahead and create multiple virtual machines at the same time or install virtual machine operating systems at the same time. You are limited by the amount of resources you've got. You only have so much RAM and so much CPU power and all that. So you might find on premises, you could only go and install maybe 2 or maybe 4 virtual machines at a given time. In the cloud, you are not limited by such restrictions. I can go and multitask until I'm blue in the face. I can go and install or create virtual machines up to 100 at a given time if I want to. Because these are not local resources. It's Microsoft's resources. That's one of the benefits of being in the cloud. you get to go and push on the load to someone else. It's someone else's problem. It's using their RAM, their CPU, their hard drives. So I can go and make 100 at the same time if I want to. So while I wait for this thing to deploy, I can actually go click here, go click on virtual machines, and I can go and create. As soon as it's done, it's going to pop up here at the top in that little bell icon, which is a notification. It's going to pop up, it's going to tell me it's done. And quite often, more often than not, there's actually a little quick access link here that they allow you to click on, which will take you straight to that resource. So I don't have to go and run a search for this component first, whatever it might be. In this case, it's a virtual machine, or go look for it in the navigation pane. No, it actually gives you a convenient little link there in most cases once it's done. And it tells you, hey, click here to go to resource. I mean, that is convenient. Convenience really is something they're going for. The portal might look very complicated at times, but they are certainly trying to go and make it very convenient for you as much as they possibly can. And there we go. So my virtual machine has just been created. It doesn't show just yet. So something I've noticed is a lot of these portals are live for the most part, but you might need to go and refresh from time to time. So I'm just going to go and press F5 for now just to refresh this, and then hopefully it should pop up. And there we go. A simple refresh, and there we go. My virtual machine is currently running. I'm going to just close that. If you want to go to that specific component, which in this case is a virtual machine, you just simply go and click on it. You do have the ability to go and manage them all as a bulk operation from here, from this portal. So if I were to go and click on some of them, I do have the ability to go and restart them all in one go, stop them all in one go, start them, delete them, all that kind of stuff. For now, I just want to go specifically into that virtual machine. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on it. Now it opens what we call a blade. This might look like a navigation menu of sorts, but this is actually called a blade, believe it or not. A blade has a list of options. It's got a whole bunch of tabs. And I've mentioned this previously in the courses. You could potentially go 20 blades deep in some cases. You can go click on a tab. It's going to take you into another blade, and then another blade, and then another blade. You never know. So what I'm going to go and do here is I'm just going to stay here on the overview tab for now. But everything you see in this blade is relevant to that specific virtual machine. So we can see this is a virtual machine. Which one? That one, the one called Windows 10. So if I were to go click here on the networking tab, that's not networking for all your virtual machines. It's just the networking for that specific virtual machine. If I were to go click on connect or disks or size or anything in this specific blade, that is only relevant to this specific virtual machine, not all your virtual machines. So for now, I'm just going to click here on overview, which is where I am. Here you also have the ability to go and stop and restart and all that, but this is only relevant to this specific virtual machine. I can see some basic information about this particular machine. I'm going to go click on connect, which is going to allow me to actually connect to this virtual machine. RDP. That's why we had to go and allow port 3389 earlier. And now if I go click on download RDP, it's going to download a pre-configured RDP file. So if I'm going to go click on that, I can open it, or I can just download it. I'm just going to say open, connect. And now it's a matter of just typing in that username we chose earlier, which in my case was Burning Eyes Tech. The password I chose earlier, that 12-character password, which has to be uppercase, lowercase, numbers and symbols, all that complexity requirements. And as soon as you click on OK, it's actually going to log on to your virtual machine for the first time. Let me show you what that looks like. I'm just going to say yes, that means it's working. You see it's busy logging on for the first time, so just give it a second. Alright, so it's just asking me some basic information. I'm just going to say no for now, just to land onto the desktop. I accept. And there we go, folks. We are officially on our virtual machine, which is now no longer running on our property. It's running on someone else's property. This is officially an example of infrastructure as a service. It's officially an example of compute services. It's one out of many examples that I can actually give you. Here in the top, you would normally see your virtual machine's name if this was on premises. In this case, it's actually showing you the public IP address of this particular virtual machine. Now, depending on how you shut it down, it'll either keep it or it'll give you a new one. But these, in the past, it really did depend on how you shut it down. If you shut it down from here, the virtual machine, it'll still shut down. But depending on whether you shut the virtual machine down from inside the virtual machine or via the portal, it either will keep the IP address or not keep the IP address. Nowadays, if you go and shut it down from the portal, it actually asks you, do you want to keep that public IP address or not for that virtual machine? which is very useful, I must say, because in some cases, if you shut down a virtual machine, you probably want to keep that public IP address because you tend to want configured it or allowed it through a public firewall of some kind or an on-premises firewall. And if that IP address is going to keep changing, you're gonna have to keep on going onto the firewall, reconfigure stuff, and it's going to be a nightmare at the end of the day. So for now, I'm just going to shut this puppy down. Let me show you that I can actually do it from the portal as well. I'm just going to minimize that. If I go back here to overview, you can see it's currently running. I have the ability to stop this virtual machine now. Notice, that's what I wanted to show you guys. Public IP address will be lost if stopped. Do you want to keep it? So I have the ability to reserve this public IP address now if I want to. We could not always do that. This has only been a feature in the last year or two. So I must give it to Microsoft. That's actually something very handy. So if you want to keep it, you can go and reserve it if you've got stuff that's been pre-configured in that public IP. In my case, I literally just made this. Nothing has been configured in that public IP address. So I could actually just go and click on OK. The reason I'm turning this off is because I would like to keep some of my fake money. This might be a trial, but some fake money. I call it monopoly money for the most case. If I'm not using this virtual machine, I'm not paying for it. Now, regarding this particular virtual machine, as we've said earlier in this blade, you'll have all kinds of options. You guys can go and get yourself a trial and just go and check them out at your own discretion if you want to. You will find you can go and do even basic tasks like resetting your password. I mean, look at that. I can even go reset my password here. Unfortunately, from what I've seen, if you go and do something stupid like that, it does take a while to take effect. So as soon as I've changed my password, it might tell you it's done. Although I've seen it takes 2 or 5 minutes before it actually tells you it's done. But just because it says it's done doesn't mean it actually is done. It could take 5 to 10 minutes for that thing to actually take effect. So I would say wait about 5 minutes, go make yourself a cup of coffee, come back, and by then it should actually have taken effect. So yeah, let's go back to the slideshow, boys and girls. Okay, and here we are back on the portal. So I think we've pretty much covered what virtual machines are. I will just briefly touch on that again as soon as I explain containers because I need to do a comparison between the two. I'm going to move on to our next topic, even though we've actually kind of covered it already, which is resource groups. I kind of had to go and cover what resource groups is for me to be able to go and create a virtual machine because we have to first go and create a resource group before we can go and create a virtual machine. Now, just to give you a quick summary as to what a resource group actually is, I can't tell you why you'd want to go and use this because it varies from company to company. Each company is obviously unique, just like people. But a recommendation would be to go and use resource groups in the sense of when your components were actually created. If your components are created more or less in the same time, and especially if you're going to be deleting them in the more or less the same time, then a resource group would be a great solution because you can just go and delete that same resource group. Just delete the resource group and all the components in that resource group is going to be deleted. You can actually access these resource groups from the navigation pane. So let me just give you guys a hint as to where you can find that. I'm going to go to the portal just in a second. Okay, back on the portal we are. I'm on the dashboard. So just a quick indication as to where you can find these resource groups. Well, one of the ways at least. If you go back to your navigation pane here, on the left-hand side, one of the most common components actually is a resource group. Or that's at least a shortcut to it. So if I were to go and click on that, it's going to show me currently all the resource groups I've got. Now, one of the ones we just went and created was this one here called Virtual Machine Resource Group 1. Because I had to go and type a little one because I accidentally already made one previously for something else. So that's the one we went and created. If I were to actually go and click on that resource group, we are going to be able to see all the components which is currently in here. And I have the ability to go and delete them all in one go and change something of them all in one go, but they are all stored in the same location more or less. This is metadata in most cases. So that is, in short, where you can find your resource groups. That's actually all I wanted to show you guys. So I think let me circle back to the slide. And there you have it. So now we know where to go and find these resource groups. We've got a fair understanding as to what they are as well. It's a logical grouping of your components. So this could be because maybe they're all virtual machines. You can go and create yourself a resource group purely for the purpose of just storing all your virtual machines regardless of where they are. It could be a resource group to store all the components in a particular branch or a particular building or a particular country. The reason why you've got them and how you organize them is completely up to you and your imagination today. So I'm going to move on to the next topic here, which is obviously Azure Containers. Now, what is a container? This is not a container that you would just go and put in some random puzzle pieces or whatever it is you've got around in your house. No, absolutely not. This container is actually very much the same as a virtual machine. There's a lot of similarities. Now, if you go and connect to a normal virtual machine, at first glance, you wouldn't even know that you're on a virtual machine. Unless you are the person that's managing it in the background, you would not know that you're actually working on a virtual machine or that you're connecting to a virtual machine. The same can be said about a container. You would not know. But there are some distinct differences between containers. Now, virtual machines, to be able to host them on premises, you would normally need to go and use something like Hyper-V. Containers, we quite often go and use something like Docker, which is actually a Linux tool, but now it's being used on the Microsoft side as well. Now, virtual machines, with them, you get to choose the operating system. I mean, you guys saw earlier when I went and created myself a virtual machine in the cloud, I still had the ability to go and choose the operating system, even though it was actually in the cloud. I mean, generally, you relinquish a lot of control when you put stuff in the cloud, but even though it was in the cloud, I still have the ability to go and choose the operating system. With containers, you cannot. It shares the operating system with the host. Now, there's pros and cons to that. With both virtual machines and containers, there's pros and cons. With virtual machines, great, you get to choose the operating system. So if you would like to be in control of that, great, you'd be able to do that. Containers, not so much. Containers have the same operating system as the host. So whatever the host is running, that is what the container will have in most cases. Now, with virtual machines, keeping in mind that you do get to choose the operating system, that means you're going to have to go and install said operating system, which also means it's going to occupy space. So if this virtual machine is on premises, that can become a real doozy very quickly because each virtual machine's operating system, well, that's going to occupy data. So if you've got 100 virtual machines, that's a lot of space, boys and girls. If you've got containers, they share the operating system with the host. They don't actually have their own operating system. So how much space do they occupy? None. So because they're sharing it with the host. Now, some questions that some people normally have at this point in time when I say they share the operating system with the host is, what about the sensitivity of data? That is not actually a concern because you're only going to be sharing the operating system and the kernel and stuff like that. If you've got any programs, any documents and files and whatever it might be in your actual host operating system, none of that is going to be visible or accessible from the container. The container is like a blank slate, blank computer, blank virtual machine, blank container. It's blank. It's like a whole brand new computer. It's just sharing the host files, but that's about the extent of it. So you're not going to have to worry yourself about data sensitivity or people seeing data they're not supposed to because the host file is being shared. Absolutely not. Another benefit here is, since it's sharing the host operating system, how long does it actually start? Well, a virtual machine starts very slowly. Containers start very quickly. Virtual machines start slowly because they are going to have to go and start their own actual operating system. That takes long. It takes as long as a real computer. Containers, well, there's nothing to actually go and start. It was technically already running in the background. So with that in mind, a container starts up very quickly. So if you would need to go and start something up very quickly, container is going to be the way to go. So yeah, there's a few differences, key differences, I should say, between containers and virtual machines. Unfortunately, containers are a little bit more on the complicated side. I wouldn't say it's complicated, but if you need to go and get yourself a container versus getting yourself a virtual machine, it's going to be a lot easier to get yourself a virtual machine versus getting a container. I mean, with a virtual machine, especially if it's on premises, you just need to get yourself Hyper-V. So if it's on the client side, Hyper-V is just something you need to go and turn on in your features. So you just go to add and remove programs, you go to Windows features, turn on and off Windows features, and you simply just go and turn on a Hyper-V feature. This is only available on Windows 10, Microsoft says, but I've seen it's actually available on Windows 8.1 as well. So assuming you have Windows 10, this is only available on the professional or enterprise side of Windows 10. Anything lower than that does not have Hyper-V. You will not be able to go and turn it on. On the server side, you just simply go and add as a role. So yeah, now we've got a fair understanding as to what containers are, what virtual machines are, what resource groups are, and just computing in general. Alright guys, it's reached that point where this episode's getting too long, so I'm going to have to throw the rest of the stuff over to the next episode. So thank you very much for watching this episode. This episode was obviously about competing with Azure. If you have not done so already, please give the video a like. I do appreciate it. Maybe consider subscribing to the channel if you have not done so already. At least then you'll be informed of when the next episode comes out or if I happen to release a new series. And I will see you guys on the next episode. Thanks, guys.
If you love me, let me know. If you don't, then let me.